The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and desperation. I sat rigid in the plastic chair, my phone clutched in trembling hands, staring at the text message that had arrived 30 seconds ago. Unknown number. This is Patricia Whitmore. Your son is in the ER. Jonathan had a seizure. Please come immediately. My son. Jonathan. The boy I'd raised alone for 6 years while his biological father built a new life 3 states away, convinced he'd never contributed to creating him. The automatic door slid open, and she appeared, Patricia Whitmore, my ex-mother-in-law, the woman who'd stood silent in her pristine living room 7 years ago while her son accused me of infidelity and walked out of our marriage. Her silver hair was disheveled, mascara tracked down her carefully powdered cheeks, and her hands shook as she spotted me. Olivia. Her voice cracked. Thank God you're here. I rose slowly, my entire body vibrating with a fury I'd carefully contained for years. What are you doing with my son? I can explain. What are you doing with Jonathan? My voice echoed through the waiting room, drawing stares from other anxious families. A doctor emerged from the treatment area, clipboard in hand. Family of Jonathan Cole? That's me. I pushed past Patricia, my heart hammering. I'm his mother. The doctor's expression softened. He's stable. The seizure was triggered by a severe allergic reaction, shellfish, we believe. Do you have a history of shellfish allergies in your family?
No.
His father sighed. I stopped, the words bitter on my tongue. It doesn't matter. Actually, Patricia's voice came from behind me, barely a whisper. It runs in our family. David's cousin nearly died from it when he was 9. The doctor nodded, making notes. That's helpful to know. He'll need to stay overnight for observation, but he should make a full recovery. You can see him now. As the doctor walked away, I turned to face Patricia, my voice low and dangerous. You need to tell me exactly how my son ended up with you, and you need to tell me now. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. Can we please go somewhere private?
No.
I crossed my arms. Right here. Right now. She glanced around the waiting room, then met my eyes with something that looked like shame. I've been watching him. For months. At the park near your apartment, at his daycare. I needed to see him. To know him. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. You've been stalking my child? No, not stalking. Just watching. From a distance. But today at the park he started choking. His lips turned blue. The woman with him, your sitter, she froze. I ran over, I called 911, I performed the Heimlich. A piece of shrimp came up. Someone must have been eating near the playground. My legs felt weak. This stranger, this woman who'd failed to defend me when it mattered most, had saved my son's life. I need to see him. I moved toward the treatment area, but Patricia caught my arm. Olivia, please. I know I have no right to ask, but there's something you need to know. About David. About why I've been watching Jonathan. She paused, her grip tightening. My son is dying. 7 years earlier. The test was positive. 2 pink lines that would change everything. I'd stood in our tiny bathroom in our starter home in Portland, my hands shaking, tears streaming down my face, tears of joy, of terror, of overwhelming love for the tiny collection of cells growing inside me. David and I had been trying for 18 months. 18 months of negative tests, of hoping and praying, of watching friends and cousins announce pregnancies while we smiled through gritted teeth. When I showed him that test, David had lifted me off my feet, spinning me around our cramped kitchen while laughing and crying at the same time. We'd called his mother that night, and Patricia had driven 2 hours from Salem to celebrate with champagne for them and sparkling cider for me. I'm going to be a grandmother, she'd whispered, touching my still flat stomach with reverence. Oh, sweetheart, you've made us so happy. The pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness that lasted all day, every day, for 16 weeks. Sciatica that made walking painful. Gestational diabetes that required careful monitoring and insulin injections. But David was there through all of it, rubbing my feet when they swelled, making me eggs at 3 in the morning when nothing else would stay down, reading what to expect when you're expecting cover to cover, highlighting passages and making notes in the margins. We'd prepared the nursery together, painting the walls a soft sage green, assembling the crib while laughing at the incomprehensible instructions, hanging tiny clothes in the closet. David would press his ear to my stomach, talking to our son in a voice full of wonder. "Hey, little man.
This is your dad.
I can't wait to meet you. I promise I'm going to teach you everything I know. How to throw a baseball, how to change a tire, how to treat people with respect. You're going to be amazing." Jonathan arrived 3 weeks early, after 22 hours of labor that ended in an emergency C-section. But when they placed him on my chest, all the pain evaporated. He was perfect, 8 pounds of wrinkled, screaming perfection, with David's dark hair and my green eyes. David cut the umbilical cord with tears streaming down his face.
We made him live.
We made a whole person. For 6 weeks, we were happy. Exhausted, overwhelmed, covered in spit up and operating on 90-minute sleep cycles, but happy. David took paternity leave from his job at the software company, and we navigated parenthood together, laughing at our mistakes and marveling at this tiny human who depended on us for everything. Then came the genetics appointment. Jonathan had a minor clubfoot, nothing serious, easily correctable with a brace. But because of it, our pediatrician recommended genetic testing to rule out any underlying conditions. It was supposed to be routine, a simple precaution. "There's an anomaly in the results," Dr. Chen had said, her expression carefully neutral. "Nothing that affects Jonathan's health, but something unusual enough that I felt I should mention it. The genetic markers suggest, they suggest that Mr. Whitmore isn't Jonathan's biological father." The silence in that office was absolute. I'd stared at her, not comprehending. "That's impossible. These tests are very accurate. There's less than a 0.01% chance of error. I recommend confirming with a paternity test, but—" "Get out." David's voice was cold, unrecognizable. He was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I was something dangerous. "David."
Get out.
He stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "I need to talk to my wife. Alone." Dr. Chen left, her expression troubled. The moment the door closed, David turned to me, and the man I'd loved for 4 years was gone. In his place was someone made of ice and suspicion. "Who is he?" "David, this is a mistake. There's no one else. There's never been anyone else. The test doesn't lie, Olivia." "Then the test is wrong." I was shaking, Jonathan sleeping peacefully in my arms, oblivious to his parents' world crumbling around him. "We can do another test." "We can." "I don't need another test. I should have known. God, I should have seen it. The way you looked at Marcus at the company Christmas party. The late nights you claimed you were working. You played me perfectly, didn't you? Got me to marry you. Got me to think I'd finally gotten you pregnant, when all along—" "Stop." I was crying now, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. "You're not making sense. Marcus? Your coworker Marcus? I've spoken to him exactly twice, both times with you standing right there. David, please. You know me. You know I would never." "I don't know anything anymore." He grabbed his coat from the back of the chair. "I'm going to my mother's. Don't call me. Don't text me. I need time to think. We have a 6-week-old baby. You can't just leave." But he could.
He did.
I'd taken Jonathan home alone that day, installed his car seat with shaking hands, and cried the entire drive back to our house. The house we'd bought together, painting each room on weekends, planning our future in every carefully chosen light fixture and cabinet pull. David returned 3 days later, while Jonathan was napping. His eyes were cold, distant. Patricia was with him, standing in our entryway like a sentinel, her expression carefully blank. "I've spoken to a lawyer," David said without preamble. "I'm filing for divorce. And before you think about asking for child support, I'm also filing a motion to establish that Jonathan isn't mine. Once that's confirmed, you'll get nothing from me. David, please. Let's do the paternity test. Let's prove." The genetics test already proved everything I need to know. My lawyer says it's admissible. I'd looked at Patricia then, desperately seeking an ally. We'd been close during the pregnancy. She'd thrown me a baby shower, had been in the delivery room when Jonathan was born, had held him with tears of joy streaming down her face. Patricia, please. You know me. You know I would never cheat on David. Tell him this is crazy. She'd looked away, her jaw tight. My son needs support right now. That's all I can focus on. Support? I'm the one who needs. But the words died in my throat. There was no point. They'd already decided who I was, what I'd done. The truth didn't matter.
David moved out that day.
Within a week, he'd emptied our joint bank account, leaving me exactly enough to cover 1 month's mortgage. His lawyer was aggressive, dragging out the divorce proceedings, demanding paternity tests that I agreed to immediately because I had nothing to hide. The first test came back conclusive. David Whitmore was Jonathan's biological father with 99.99% certainty. His lawyer claimed the test was compromised, demanded another test, different lab, independent observers. That test also confirmed David's paternity. A third test. Same results. Your client is clinically unable to accept reality, my lawyer had said during a mediation session 6 months into our separation. We've now had 3 separate labs confirm paternity. Mr. Whitmore needs to accept responsibility for his son. David's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Rebecca Chen, had smiled tightly. My client's position is that the original genetics test, conducted by a certified medical facility, indicated impossibility of paternity. These subsequent tests, all requested by Mrs. Whitmore, could have been tampered with. Tampered with? I'd exploded. By who? By me? I was standing in the room the entire time they took the samples. You were there. Your client was there. David hadn't even looked at me. He'd sat at that conference table, his jaw clenched, staring at a spot on the wall. My client, Rebecca continued smoothly, is prepared to offer a clean divorce with no alimony and no child support, provided Mrs. Whitmore signs away any future claims on his estate. Your client has a legal obligation to his son. His alleged son. The word, alleged, hung in the air like poison. In the end, I'd sign the papers. Not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. David had depleted our savings on lawyer fees. I was behind on the mortgage, behind on every bill, surviving on credit cards and help from my parents. I needed it to be over. The day our divorce was finalized, I'd seen David in the courthouse hallway. He was thinner, haunted-looking, but his expression when he saw me was pure contempt. I hope it was worth it, he'd said. Whatever you got from whoever he is. I hope it was worth destroying our family. Then he'd walked away, and I hadn't seen or heard from him in 6 years. Now, standing in the hospital hallway with Patricia Whitmore's revelation echoing in my ears, I felt like I was drowning. Your son is dying, I repeated slowly. And that's supposed to make me sympathetic? That's supposed to make me forget that he abandoned his child based on a lie. It wasn't a lie. Patricia's voice was barely audible. Not to him. Olivia, there's something I never told you. Something I should have explained years ago, but I was ashamed. Our family, we've always been ashamed of it. I need to see my son.
Please.
Just 5 minutes. She gripped my arm tighter. David was diagnosed with Klinefelter syndrome when he was 15. The name meant nothing to me. I shook my head impatiently. It's a chromosomal condition. Men with Klinefelter are usually infertile. They produce very little sperm, often none at all. When David was diagnosed, the doctors told us he would likely never father children naturally. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. We never told anyone. He was so ashamed, so devastated. It affected every relationship he had, every girlfriend. He wouldn't let himself get serious with anyone because he thought he couldn't give them children. My stomach turned to ice. And then he met me. And then he met you, and you were so understanding about the fact that you weren't getting pregnant right away. You never pressured him. You never made him feel inadequate. You were patient and kind, and when you finally did get pregnant, her voice cracked. It was a miracle. We all thought it was a miracle. The doctor said his sperm count was so low that natural conception was nearly impossible, but not completely impossible. You and Jonathan, you were his miracle. So, when Dr. Chin said the genetics indicated he wasn't the father, every insecurity he'd ever had came roaring back. Every fear that he wasn't good enough, wasn't man enough, that his condition made him less than. And instead of being rational, instead of trusting you, he ran. He built a wall and convinced himself that you'd betrayed him because that was easier than facing the alternative. Which was what? My voice was sharp. Patricia met my eyes. That the doctors were wrong. That he was the father. That his condition wasn't as absolute as they'd told him. Because if that was true, then he destroyed his family for nothing. The hallway spun around me. You knew he was wrong, and you let him do it anyway. I didn't know. Not for certain. The genetics test said. 3 paternity tests said otherwise. 3 tests, Patricia. And you stayed silent. I know. She was sobbing now, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. I know, and I've hated myself every day since. But he's my son, Olivia. He's my boy, and he was so broken, and I chose him. I chose supporting him over defending you, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to rage about the years I'd struggled alone. The nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the birthday parties and Christmas mornings and first days of school that David had missed. But before I could say anything, a nurse appeared at my elbow. Miss Cole? Jonathan is asking for you. I brushed past Patricia, without another word. Jonathan was in a pediatric room decorated with cheerful murals of underwater scenes. He looked tiny in the hospital bed, and 4 in his small hand, his dark hair, David's hair, messy against the white pillow. When he saw me, his face crumpled. Mom, I was at his side in an instant, gathering him carefully into my arms, checking the 4-line, smoothing his hair, breathing in his little boy's smell of sweat and fear and the lingering antiseptic of the hospital. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. You're okay. I was so scared. I couldn't breathe, and there was this lady, and... I know, but you're safe now. You're going to be just fine. He clung to me, and I held him, my heart breaking and reforming with every breath he took. This was my son.
Mine.
I'd grown him under my heart, birthed him, raised him, loved him through every skinned knee and nightmare and triumph. And David had thrown that away. After Jonathan fell asleep, I sat in the chair beside his bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Patricia had disappeared, probably fled, I thought bitterly. Good. I had nothing more to say to her. But an hour later, she returned with coffee and something else, a manila envelope that she held like it contained something precious and terrible. I shouldn't give this to you, she said quietly, sitting in the chair across from me. My son, if he knew I had this, if he knew I was showing you, then don't. I didn't look at her, keeping my eyes on Jonathan. It's his medical records. From the last 6 months. She placed the envelope on the rolling table between us. He was diagnosed with kidney cancer. Stage 4. It's aggressive, it's spreading. He's been through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, but it's not responding. His doctors say he has maybe 6 months left. Maybe less. I said nothing. He's known about Jonathan for 3 years. The words came out in a rush. He hired a private investigator. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know, and the investigator found you. Found pictures of Jonathan. He looked so much like David did at that age, and David, he couldn't accept it. He convinced himself the photos were manipulated. But then the investigator got a DNA sample. My head snapped up. He what? From Jonathan's daycare. A cup he drank from. I know it's illegal, I know it's wrong, but David was desperate. And the results came back, conclusive. Jonathan is his son. Which meant he destroyed our family for nothing. Yes. Patricia's voice broke. And instead of doing the right thing, instead of coming to you and begging for forgiveness, he disappeared. He moved to Seattle, threw himself into work, avoided me, avoided everyone who knew about what happened. And then he got sick and suddenly, she gestured helplessly. Suddenly, there wasn't time anymore. For making amends. For being a father. For anything. I looked down at the envelope. Every fiber of my being wanted to leave it sealed, to walk away from this mess, and never look back. But I couldn't. Because if David was dying, if Jonathan's father was dying, then my son deserved to know. Deserved the chance to meet him, to have whatever closure he could get. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why now? Because David knows I've been watching Jonathan. I told him about the park, about seeing him every day. And last week he asked me to bring him a picture. Just one picture, to keep beside his hospital bed. She wiped her eyes. I took dozens. I couldn't help myself. And when I showed them to David, he cried. He held them and cried and said, "He's beautiful. My boy is so beautiful." Something cracked in my chest. He wants to meet him, Patricia continued. He knows he has no right. He knows what he did is unforgivable. But he's dying, Olivia. He's dying, and his last wish is to see his son just once. To tell him he's sorry. To tell him, her voice failed. To tell him he loves him. I looked at Jonathan, sleeping peacefully despite the trauma of the day. 6 years old. Smart, funny, endlessly curious. He asked about his father sometimes. Why didn't he live with us? Where was he? Did he love us? I'd always told him that his father was far away, that the situation was complicated, that he was loved no matter what. What would it do to him to meet the man who'd abandoned him? What would it do to him if that man died without ever knowing him? I need time, I said finally. I need time to think about this, to process. You can't just drop this on me and expect an answer. I understand. But David doesn't have much time. Maybe weeks. Maybe days. Then maybe you should have thought about that years ago. Patricia flinched but nodded. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'll go. She stood, hesitated. Thank you. For letting me save him today. For letting me have those few minutes with him. He's, Olivia, he's everything we hoped he would be. You've done an incredible job raising him. I hope you know that. After she left, I opened the envelope with shaking hands. David's medical records were extensive and devastating. Diagnosis, prognosis, treatment plans. Each page was worse than the last. But tucked in the back, separate from the medical files, was something else, a letter. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. David's handwriting, once so neat and precise, now ravaged by illness and medication. Olivia, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve either. I'm dying, and I'm terrified, not of death, but of dying without ever telling our son I'm sorry. Without telling you I'm sorry. Without explaining how completely I destroyed the only good thing I ever had. When Dr. Chin showed us those genetics results, something broke in me. Not because I thought you'd cheated, some rational part of me knew you never would. But because I'd spent my entire life believing I was defective, broken, less than. The doctors had told me I couldn't have children. And when they suggested I wasn't Jonathan's father, it confirmed everything I'd always believed about myself. So I ran. I built a wall of anger and suspicion because it was easier than admitting I was scared. Easier than facing the possibility that I'd been wrong about my own body, my own capabilities, my own worth. By the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. I'd burned every bridge. You'd rebuilt your life without me. Jonathan didn't know me, and I was too ashamed to fix it. I see him sometimes in pictures my mother takes. I know she's been watching him. I ask her to. I needed to see him grow. He looks so much like me, Liv. The same eyes, the same smile. He's everything I dreamed our son would be. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that walking away from you and Jonathan is the greatest regret of my life. That not a day has passed when I didn't think about you both. That if I could go back, if I could change it. But I can't. All I can do is tell you the truth. I was a coward. I let my insecurities destroy my family. And I'm so sorry. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Maybe that's better. Maybe Jonathan is better off without me. But if there's any chance, any possibility that you could show him this letter someday, tell him his father loved him more than life itself, I would be grateful. I love you. I never stopped loving you. And I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to show it when it mattered.
David.
I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, before carefully folding it and placing it back in the envelope. The decision to let Jonathan meet David wasn't immediate. It took 3 days of agonizing internal debate, of talking to my therapist, of lying awake at night weighing my son's potential hurt against his potential healing. In the end, it was Jonathan who made the decision for me. "Mom," he said on the 3rd night, as I was tucking him into bed at home, fully recovered from his allergic reaction. "The lady at the hospital. The one who saved me. She said she's my grandma." My blood ran cold. "What?" "When we were waiting for the ambulance. She was holding my hand, and she said, 'I'm your grandmother. Your daddy's mommy.' Is that true?" I sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his comforter with shaking hands. "Yes, baby. That's true. So, I have a daddy?" His voice was small, hopeful, and it broke my heart. "Yes." "Where is he?" I took a deep breath. "He's very sick. He's in the hospital. Can we visit him?" Those wide green eyes, my eyes, looked up at me with such innocent hope. "I want to meet him. I want to tell him about school and my friends and my dinosaur collection. Maybe it would make him feel better."
How could I deny him that?
How could I let my own hurt, my own justified anger, stand between my son and his dying father? "Okay," I whispered. "We can visit him. But, Jonathan, you need to understand something. Your daddy made some mistakes. Big mistakes. And he wasn't there when you were born, and he hasn't been there while you've been growing up. That wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. But it might make things complicated. That's okay." He smiled at me with that gap-toothed grin that never failed to make my heart melt. "You always say everybody makes mistakes. And everybody deserves a chance to say sorry." From the mouths of babes. The hospital in Seattle was modern and sterile, all glass and white walls. Patricia met us in the lobby, her expression careful, cautious. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "David, he knows you're coming. He's nervous.
Scared.
He asked me to tell you that if you change your mind at any point, he'll understand." "We're not changing our minds," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I looked down at Jonathan, who was staring around the lobby with wide eyes, clutching my hand tightly. "Are you ready, baby?" He nodded solemnly. David's room was on the oncology floor. As we approached, I felt my heart rate accelerate, my palms grow sweaty. The last time I'd seen him, he'd been in the courthouse, walking away from me with contempt in his eyes. What would he look like now? How would I react? Patricia knocked softly on the partially open door. "David? They're here." "Send them in." The voice was David's, but not raspier, weaker, aged beyond his 36 years. I pushed open the door. The man in the hospital bed was a ghost of the David I'd married. He'd lost at least 40 pounds, his once athletic frame now gaunt, his dark hair gone from chemotherapy, his skin pale and papery. But his eyes, those were the same. Brown and deep and currently shimmering with tears. "Olivia." His voice cracked on my name. "You came." "I came." I stepped aside, revealing Jonathan, who was half hiding behind me. "Jonathan, this is David. Your dad." For a long moment, they just stared at each other. David's face was a landscape of emotions: wonder, grief, regret, love. Jonathan looked uncertain, his small hand gripping mine like a lifeline. Then David did something I didn't expect. He started to cry. "You're so beautiful," he whispered. "My God, you're so beautiful." "Hi, Jonathan. I'm your dad. And I'm so sorry I haven't been there. I'm so sorry." Something in Jonathan's expression shifted. Maybe it was the raw honesty in David's voice. Maybe it was the obvious pain, physical and emotional, that radiated from the man in the bed. Or maybe it was just that 6-year-old's natural capacity for forgiveness. He let go of my hand and took a tentative step forward. Are you really dying? Jonathan, I gasped, but David let out a wet laugh. It's okay. Yes, buddy. I'm really sick. The doctors tried to fix me, but he shrugged helplessly. Sometimes bodies don't do what we want them to. That's sad. Jonathan took another step closer. Does it hurt? Sometimes. But right now, I feel pretty good because I get to meet you. Grandma Patricia showed me pictures of you.
Before you got sick.
You look like me. Actually, David said softly, you look like me. You have my eyes and my hair, and his voice broke. You're perfect. You're absolutely perfect, and I'm so proud of you. But you don't know me. It wasn't accusatory, just factual. The simple logic of a child. You're right. I don't know you as well as I should. As well as I want to. But I've been hearing about you from Grandma Patricia. She says you're smart and funny and kind. She says you love dinosaurs and that you're learning to play soccer. Is that true? Jonathan nodded eagerly, suddenly animated. I'm on the Raptors team, and I just learned to do a penalty kick. And my favorite dinosaur is the velociraptor, but not the movie kind, the real kind with feathers. Did you know they had feathers? I did not know that. David's smile was radiant despite the tears streaming down his face. Tell me more. And Jonathan did. He climbed up onto a chair beside David's bed and talked. He talked about school and his teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, and his best friend, Marcus. I winced at the name. The same Marcus David had once accused me of cheating with, who turned out to be happily married with 3 kids. He talked about the science fair project we'd done together, about the chapter book I was reading to him at bedtime, about his dream to be a paleontologist when he grew up. David listened to every word like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard. He asked questions, laughed at Jonathan's jokes, admired the drawing Jonathan pulled from his backpack. And I stood against the wall, watching, my heart breaking and healing simultaneously. After 30 minutes, a nurse came to check David's vitals. I think someone needs to rest, she said gently, noting the exhaustion evident in David's face. Can I come back? Jonathan asked immediately. Tomorrow? I want to tell you about my rock collection. David looked at me, his expression pleading. I nodded slowly. I'd love that, buddy. I'd love that more than anything. Patricia walked us out while David slept. In the elevator, she turned to Jonathan with a warm smile. You were wonderful with your dad. He's going to sleep well tonight, dreaming about you. He's nice, Jonathan said simply. Then, looking up at me, Mom, are you mad at him? The question caught me off guard. It's complicated, baby. Because he left. Yes. But he said he was sorry. And you always say that when people say sorry and mean it, we should forgive them. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I knelt down to Jonathan's eye level. You're right. I do say that. But sometimes forgiveness takes time. Sometimes people hurt us so badly that even though we know we should forgive them, it's hard. Does that make sense? He considered this seriously. I guess. But I think you should forgive him. Because he's dying, and if you don't forgive him before he dies, you'll never get to. 6 years old, and wise beyond his years. We visited David every day for the next 2 weeks. Every day, Jonathan would burst into the room with new stories, new drawings, new treasures to share. And every day, David would light up like someone had given him the greatest gift in the world. On the 8th day, after Jonathan had fallen asleep in the chair beside David's bed, David finally looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since we'd arrived. I need to talk to you, he said quietly. And I need you to let me say everything before you respond. Can you do that? I nodded, my throat tight. I was a coward. There's no other word for it. When Dr. Chin showed us those genetics results, I should have fought for you. I should have demanded more tests immediately. I should have trusted you, trusted us, trusted our love. But I didn't. He paused, struggling for breath. I let my insecurities, my fears about my diagnosis, poison everything good in my life. And by the time I realized what I'd done, I was so ashamed that I couldn't face it. I couldn't face you. You could have, I said, my voice rough with suppressed emotion. Any time in the last 6 years, you could have come back. You could have apologized. You could have been a father. I know. And I'll regret that cowardice for whatever time I have left. He looked at Jonathan, sleeping peacefully, one small hand curled near his face. He's everything, Liv. Everything I didn't know I was missing. Everything I threw away. And I can't, his voice broke. I can't fix it. I can't give him back the years I stole from him. From us. No, I agreed. You can't. But I can do one thing. I changed my will. Everything, the house in Seattle, my retirement accounts, the life insurance policy, it's all going to Jonathan. And to you. To manage until he's old enough. I know it doesn't make up for what I did. I know it's not enough. But it's all I have to give. I shook my head slowly. I don't want your money, David. It's not about what you want. It's about what Jonathan deserves. He deserves to go to college without student loans. He deserves to have opportunities. He deserves something from the father who failed him so completely. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound Jonathan's soft breathing and the steady beep of David's monitors. I don't forgive you, I said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did, it nearly destroyed me. I had to rebuild my entire life from scratch. I had to raise our son alone, with no support, no help. There were times I didn't know how we'd make rent. Times I cried myself to sleep because I was so exhausted and overwhelmed and angry. You don't get to erase that with apologies and inheritance money. I know, but I looked at Jonathan, at the peace on his small face. I'm trying. For him. Because he loves you already, even though he barely knows you. Because he deserves to have this time with you, whatever time is left. So I'm trying. That's more than I deserve. Yes, I agreed. It is. David died 3 weeks after that conversation. The cancer spread rapidly, and by the end, he was in hospice, barely conscious most of the time. But he had lucid moments, and in those moments, Jonathan was there, holding his hand, telling him stories, singing him songs he'd learned in school. I watched my son care for his dying father with a grace that humbled me. He was gentle and patient, and loving in ways I didn't know a 6-year-old could be. The day before David died, he woke from a morphine sleep and beckoned me closer. Jonathan had gone to get juice from the cafeteria with Patricia. Thank you, David whispered, for giving me this, for letting me know him.
He deserved to know you, I said.
No matter what happened between us, he deserved that. Liv, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said years ago. He struggled to take a breath, his lungs failing. When I left, when I accused you of cheating, I knew, deep down, that you hadn't. I knew you never would. But I was so scared. So convinced that I was defective, that I couldn't be a real man, that I couldn't father children. And when there was evidence, even flawed evidence, that seemed to confirm it, I grabbed onto it. Because it was easier to be angry at you than to face my own inadequacy. David. No, let me finish. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You loved me completely, without conditions. You never made me feel less than, never pressured me, never looked at me with pity. And I repaid that by destroying us. By choosing my ego over our family.
And I'm sorry.
I'm so desperately sorry. I felt tears streaming down my face. I loved you too. So much. And you broke me. I know. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know you did nothing wrong. Nothing. This was all me. All my fear and weakness and selfishness. You are an amazing mother, an amazing woman, and you deserved so much better than what I gave you. Yes, I said through my tears. I did. He smiled weakly. You're not going to let me off easy, are you?
No.
I'm not. Good. He closed his eyes, exhausted from the conversation. That's good. You shouldn't. Just promise me something. What? Tell Jonathan, when he's older, tell him the truth. All of it. Tell him his father loved him. Tell him I was an idiot and a coward, but that I loved him more than life itself. Tell him. His voice broke. Tell him I'm sorry I didn't get to see him grow up. that I would have given anything for more time. I promise. The next morning, David slipped into a coma. Jonathan sat beside him, holding his hand, talking to him about the baseball game they'd watched on TV the day before, about the new dinosaur book I'd bought him, about ordinary, beautiful, everyday things. David died peacefully that afternoon, with his son's hand in his and his ex-wife and mother standing witness to the end of a life defined by both profound love and catastrophic mistakes. 3 months later, the inheritance David left was substantial, enough to buy a house, to establish a college fund, to provide security for the first time in years. But more valuable than the money were the things I found in his Seattle house when Patricia and I went to clean it out. A room, untouched by anyone but David. The walls were covered with pictures, hundreds of them. Pictures of Jonathan at every age from birth to present day. Pictures Patricia had taken, pictures she'd printed and sent to David, pictures he'd arranged into a shrine of the son he'd abandoned. And in the closet, boxes of things he'd bought and never sent. Birthday presents for every year. Christmas gifts. First day of school supplies. A baseball glove sized for each age, as if he'd been planning to teach Jonathan to play someday. Children's books, carefully selected, with notes in the margins about which ones he'd loved as a child, which ones he thought Jonathan would enjoy. 7 years of gifts. 7 years of love, carefully catalogued and hidden away. I'd stood in that room and cried for the man David had been, for the father he'd tried to be from a distance, for the family we could have had if he'd just been brave enough to fight for it. Jonathan had asked to keep some things, the baseball gloves, the books, a stuffed velociraptor that David had apparently bought the year Jonathan had first expressed interest in dinosaurs. The rest, I packed carefully and put in storage for when Jonathan was older, when he could understand the full, complicated truth of his father's love. 1 year later, Mom, look. Jonathan ran toward me across the baseball field, his Raptors uniform grass-stained and dirty, his face flushed with exertion and joy. We won, and I scored the winning goal. That's amazing, buddy. I scooped him up, swinging him around despite the fact that he was getting too big for it, that someday soon he'd be too old for public displays of affection. I'm so proud of you. I wish Dad could have seen it. He said it matter-of-factly, without sadness, a simple statement of fact. He would have liked it. He would have loved it. I corrected gently. He would have been bursting with pride. Do you think he can see me? From heaven. I like to think so. I like to think he's watching every game, every A on a test, every dinosaur fact you learn. I think he's watching all of it.
Good.
Jonathan wriggled out of my arms and ran toward his teammates, who were celebrating their victory with juice boxes and orange slices. Patricia walked over, her expression soft. In the past year, she and I had built something tentative and new, not quite a friendship, but a relationship based on shared love for Jonathan and shared grief over David. She came to baseball games and school concerts. She babysat when I needed to work late. She was slowly becoming the grandmother she should have been from the start. He's so much like David, she said quietly, watching Jonathan laugh with his friends. The way he moves, the way he throws the ball. It's like watching my son at that age. He's like both of us, I corrected. The best parts of both of us. Yes. She smiled. Yes, he is. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching Jonathan, watching the boy who'd been abandoned and reclaimed, who'd lost and found his father in the span of 3 short weeks, who carried the legacy of a complicated love in his DNA and his heart. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't a single moment. It wasn't a decision made once and sealed forever. It was a process, gradual and imperfect, full of setbacks and breakthroughs. I hadn't fully forgiven David. Maybe I never would. But I was learning to forgive Patricia, to forgive the years of silence and complicity. And slowly, painfully, I was learning to forgive myself for the anger I'd carried, for the walls I'd built, for the times I'd wished David could see what he was missing, could suffer the way I'd suffered. Because, in the end, he had suffered. He'd missed 6 years of his son's life. He died having barely known the child he'd helped create. and no amount of anger or resentment I could hold would make that right. Jonathan ran back over, his face glowing. Coach says we're going to the championship. Can Grandma Patricia come watch? I wouldn't miss it, Patricia said, ruffling his hair. I'll bring signs and everything. Awesome. He looked up at me. Can we get ice cream to celebrate? Absolutely. As we walked to the car, Jonathan's hand warm in mine, Patricia walking beside us, I thought about the letter David had written. The letter I'd saved, sealed in an envelope, waiting for the day Jonathan was old enough to read it and understand. I love you. I never stopped loving you. And I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to show it when it mattered. David had been weak when it mattered most. He'd let fear and insecurity destroy something beautiful. But in his final weeks, he'd found a different kind of strength, the strength to admit his failures, to apologize, to love his son with the intensity of someone who knew their time was limited. It wasn't enough. It couldn't erase the past, but it was something. And for Jonathan's sake, for the sake of the bright, beautiful boy walking beside me talking a mile a minute about batting averages and championship games, I chose to hold on to that something. I chose to let it be enough. Because in the end, that's what love is. Not perfection, not grand gestures, not the absence of mistakes. It's the choice to see someone fully, flaws and all, and decide that despite everything, they still matter. David had made that choice too late. But he'd made it. And someday, when Jonathan was older, I'd give him that letter. I'd tell him the full story, the betrayal and the apology, the anger and the forgiveness, the years of absence and the brief, precious weeks of connection. I'd tell him that his father loved him, even when he didn't know how to show it. That love doesn't erase mistakes, but it can soften them. That forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing to move forward despite the weight of the past. And I'd tell him that he, Jonathan David Cole, was the best thing his parents had ever created. That he was worth every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt and despair. Because he was. Mom, Jonathan tugged on my hand, pulling me from my thoughts. Are you okay? You look sad. I smiled down at him. This miracle child, this boy who carried his father's face and his mother's strength and a grace all his own. I'm not sad, baby. I'm grateful. For what?
For you.
For everything. He considered this, then grinned. I'm grateful for ice cream. Can we get mint chocolate chip? I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years.
Yes.
We can get mint chocolate chip. And as we drove toward the ice cream shop, my son chattering excitedly in the back seat, his grandmother smiling beside me, I realized something profound. We were going to be okay. All of us, the living and the dead, the forgiven and the forgiving, we were all going to be okay. It had taken years of pain, a lifetime of mistakes, and the death of a man too stubborn to accept his own capacity for love. But we'd gotten here, and that had to count for something.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.